I did quite a bit of research on where they were. So that fell by the way as well. And then winding forward to more recent times, the town started to grow very, very quickly. We are now, and I've checked these figures with the town clerk, so the current population, if you add in Eggington, which to me is effectively Leighton-Linslade, it's about 44,500. So so if you go back to 2011, when the initial planning application went in for the new Eastern Estates, let me just read you very briefly what the predecessor health authority, NHS Bedfordshire, said in its submission to the local authority, Central Bedfordshire, for the planning application for Clipston Park. So this was 12 years ago, nearly 12 years ago, in 2011, and NHS Bedfordshire said, and I quote, "It will be more important than ever to ensure that the GP surgery should be in place and functional prior to the development." 2011, that was for 1,200 houses. And roll forward a bit, these things seem to take a long while. 22nd of July 2015, we have the decision on that planning application, and there's a whole list of facilities, and it includes lots of things which have happened. There's even a pub, I'm not sure if we've got that. There's the roads, the schools, and it says very clearly a GP surgery class D1, 22nd of July 2015. And in addition to that, buying a home is probably the biggest financial purchase any of us make. And on the Clipston Park website, hosted by no less than companies like Taylor Wimpey and Barratt, two of the biggest builders in the whole country, it said, and again, I quote, "Thank you for visiting the Clipston Park website. Clipston Park is a high-quality, sustainable mixed-use development which will see the delivery of a doctor's surgery." Now, my point is that people relied on that when they bought their houses. I think that is a false representation. Someone suggested that I should get some lawyers onto Taylor Wimpey and Barratt's, because, yeah, we all know that the planning application said they had to provide a piece of land to be available after, I think, the 350th house. But this doesn't say that. It says the Clipston Park development will see the delivery of a doctor's surgery. So I've had endless conversations in private, in public, with the health authority, and these things change, and that's absolutely fine, because healthcare evolves, and we want to give you the best possible healthcare. And at a certain point, the view in the health authority, which I fully respect, is that we weren't going to go for an individual GP surgery. That was more of a cottage hospital approach, I think I was told. And that we wanted something larger that would look after you better in terms of the health and care hub. Now, I'm not a clinician. I defer to people like Dr. Henderson and our health professionals, which we have 3 here. So, okay, that was fine. If the new thinking for preventative and social prescribing and so, which I'm also a big fan of, was a health and care hub, fine. But we need something. We've had the commitments. They go back a long way. We didn't get the community hospital. We've had all the houses. We promised we get the surgery. Okay, it's not a surgery. It's going to be a hub. And I was in the middle of these conversations, and then last month, I get an email saying we're not going forward with either the surgery or the hub. And I'm afraid that really upset me on behalf of all of you, because it's my job to fight for you. Now, just briefly, let me just, and look, I'm not someone who will always defend my government. I'm proud to be in my party, but we've done things that are wrong. Just on some of the figures on the funding. So, of course, we need to train more doctors. Back in 2014, we only trained 2,600 GPs a year. Those were newly qualified doctors who come out of medical school into GP practice. Last year, that was 4,000. This year, it'll be 4,000. Next year, it'll be 4,000. So we are adding a lot more at the bottom, but we have to do 2 other things as well. Now, Dr. Henderson is actually a year older than me, God bless him, and he's still working. One of my GPs in Dunstable retired at 59, which is a year younger than me. So you can work out how old Dr. Henderson is. And but actually we have to try and get our wonderful GPs, God bless them all, and the whole primary care team, to work, if possible, all the way through to retirement. And if possible, if I dare say this, and I will stick up morning, noon and night for the primary care workforce to say are wonderful people. We have to look at the quality of their working lives, but it was possible that some of them could do a few more sessions and stay in general practice and not retire early. That would be super, super helpful as well. And I really want to make their work as interesting and enjoyable and rewarding as possible. I always say we're not North Korea. We can't chain them to their desks and make this happen. Now, just a couple of other things, and then I will conclude. So, I have very rarely, if ever, had a child in this constituency that's not had a school place to go to. So we seem to do that part of the planning system pretty well. We're in a great school here. We've got fantastic lower, middle and upper schools, primary and secondaries in some parts of the area. That part of planning and public administration generally works well. Yet I have tens of thousands of constituents who struggle to get primary care access in a timely manner. And that just seems to be wrong. And I tell you what is fundamentally wrong, and it's been wrong for a long time, but my government's in power, we need to fix it. The amount of money we are getting out of developers, the house builders, for health is utterly inadequate. The best analysis on this is for the 2018-19 year, where there was just under £7 billion of capital provided by the house builders like Taylor Wimpey and Barratt. Only £178 million of that 7 billion went for health. I think that is a disgrace. Those proportions are all wrong. That is not acceptable. We should not have let that happen. And I have put the primary care minister in touch with one of the top planning lawyers, health planning lawyers in the country, in contrast to the after debate I had on this issue in Parliament. And I'm pushing very, very hard to get that changed. Now, I want a solution to this. I don't want endless arguments and endless meetings. And only this afternoon, I was a bit depressed this morning what I was going to say to you, but I believe there is a glimmer of hope, and I won't put it more strongly than that, because I would hate to overpromise. But the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care owns quite a large plot of land off Van Dyke Road. It has been in the ownership, and that is separate from the other parts of land on the Clipston Brook development, which was supposed to be for the GP surgery, which was sort of not abandoned, but was sort of being slightly downgraded in preference of having a health and care hub. But this other piece of land off Van Dyke Road is in the name of the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and has been, I think, since the 1980s, forever. Now that's a valid criticism, why we haven't released the value from that land and done something with it. But partly because of increased agitation on these issues in recent months and weeks, the legal advice to the Department of Health and Social Care came in on Monday that it is finally possible to release some value from that land. So that is new. I only heard it today, and that brings an additional pot of money to the table. Now, I don't know how much. My understanding is we wouldn't have to put the facilities on that part of the town, because if you live in Linslade, I'm conscious it's quite a long way to get to. So it may not be the right site. The important thing is that it brings some extra cash to the table. Now, I know we need capital and we need revenue. I know that money is tight. I think my gentle challenge to my good friends at the Health Authority here is that, as Dr. Henderson said, it sometimes feels as if primary care is a little bit the Cinderella. It's not been quite prioritised enough. If we can do more at primary care, we can keep more people out of hospital. So my gentle challenge is, we've got that extra pot of land. Please look at your budgets. Can you please reprioritise something? I know you have a lot to pay for. It's a big budget, £1.7 billion locally. And if we do have some capital money, can you please just find the revenue funding to proceed with all those primary care schemes, which you said you couldn't take forward just out of primary care when you made your announcement last month. But my commitment to you is I will go on convening, lobbying, arguing. I can't give you this. I don't have that power as an individual MP, but I will keep working to get people around the table, to challenge, to convene, to make the case, to try and make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Selous. Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Felicity Cox, CEO of BLMK. Sorry, my apologies. I believe Rima is going to speak first. Hi, I'm Rima Makarem, and I chair the Integrated Care Board, and I'd like, first of all, to thank you all for inviting us tonight. There's a lot of misinformation that we'd like to correct, but actually, really importantly, what would be a good outcome for us is to really hear your views, and we genuinely want to hear them. So we know that access to GPs is really emotive at the moment. None of us can go and see our GPs. Regardless of where we live in this country, we all feel that we haven't got access to our GPs. We all know that terrible thing of having to be up and calling the GP at 8 o'clock in the morning and never getting through, or calling day after day and not getting through. I do understand we're all trying to do the same thing. But believe it or not, GPs are seeing 15 to 20% more appointments than they did before the pandemic, and they're knackered. They're absolutely worn out. And at the same time, they're getting bad press in the media, and they are getting quite a lot of aggression at the front door. This is a national problem. And as a consequence, many GPs, not only can we not encourage the youngsters to become GPs, but many older GPs are saying, I'm retiring, or I'm just giving up because it's really bad for my mental health. So we have a problem at both ends, getting people through the door and then asking the more experienced ones to stay. So that's just to set the scene. The next thing I wanted to say is, I think somehow we've managed to completely shoot ourselves in the foot in explaining to everybody what was discussed and what wasn't discussed. So we have to pay for existing GP premises. We pay the rent, we pay for the leaking roof, we find new premises when the premises are falling down. And we have 97 practices across BLMK. At the moment, or at that point of that meeting, 53 of them had asked for extra funds for various reasons, mainly maintenance, some of it expansion of existing premises, and Felicity will explain it further, but we found some extra money to help 23 of the 50 that we had on the list. We didn't discuss the new facilities. We are still working on the 5 hubs for central Bedfordshire, one of which is planned for here. It is not off the table, it never has been off the table, but it does require quite a lot of thinking. What services should go in that hub? What do you as a local population need? What services can our existing providers put in there? How can we link it up in a way that makes sense for you in one-stop shops, or bypassing the GP to get directly to services that you need? And Felicity will explain a little bit more the concept of hubs and what we're trying to do. So if I can take the heat out of that, nothing is off the table. We do need to find the money, absolutely, and there are ways of doing it. So we will do that, and I'd really like to thank Andrew because he's introduced us to ministers. There are a lot of conversations behind the scenes to find that money. So we are on the case. But we can't make you wait that long. It can take quite a while, and you need to see someone. And you need to have access to primary care. So that's my way of introduction, and Felicity will take you through more of the detail. I thought also it's an opportunity to tell you who we are. The Integrated Care Board is actually only 7 months old. I don't know how many people realise that. We've only been in existence since July. We are not the health authority. We are a partnership. Everybody on this platform, apart from Andrew, is the ICB. We are a partnership between the hospitals, and that's the 3 hospitals in BLMK, not the other 4 that you might see outside of the patch. All the GPs, 2 ambulance trusts, mental health, community health, 4 health watches, all 4 councils, and up to about 4,000 voluntary and charitable sector organisations. And we are coming together as a big partnership to work better together so that you have services wrapped around your needs. This is a new thing across the country. There are 42 ICBs, and we will, yes, we look after the NHS pound that's entrusted to us for this patch, but it's much broader than that, which is why we work with, for example, Central Bedfordshire Council to work out what the hubs are going to look like. Where's the money going to come from? How are we going to fill those hubs? And how do we make them happen as quickly as possible? So that's a brief intro, and then if I may, I'll now pass on to Felicity.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Felicity Cox. I'm the Chief Exec of Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes Integrated Care Board. I should also declare I'm a pharmacist as well, so just in case people wonder. I just wanted to reiterate what Rima said, which is we have made no decisions on health and care hubs at the moment. We have one in progress at Dunstable, and we're working with Central Bedfordshire Council to look at how we can make the other hubs stack up. I'd like to add my thanks to Rima for Andrew's help in enabling us to see Minister O'Brien, who we saw very rapidly a couple of weeks ago, and I've seen again this week. And indeed, he said to me that the Van Dyke land that the Secretary of State feels it can be released. So just to thank Andrew for the work he's doing behind the scenes to make some things happen. We do have a large budget. Yes, it's £1.6 billion. However, we also have a lot of things to spend it on. So more than half our budget goes on hospital services, and then significant amounts go on mental health, on community services, on continuing healthcare for people that need long-term care at home, as well as 11% of our budget going on primary care and another 8% going on our medicines. So whilst we have a significantly large pot, we have to find ways of releasing money from that to create funds to create anything new that we want to do. And that means that we, as a health service, have to work in different ways. And hubs are one way of doing that, because if we can integrate services around the people that they look after, then we can bring services together, we can save time, save handoffs, save money by doing that. So hubs are a very important part of our planning. We need to have the right clinical strategy and the right change in services to use them. We invest in Leighton Buzzard £6.6 million in primary care, and our primary care, our GPs deliver 275,000 appointments in a year. So there is significant resource that's here already, but I recognise that it's not meeting all the demand that we want, and we know that post-COVID the demand for health services is higher, and we partly understand the reason for that and we partly don't. We managed to find an additional £2 million, just under £2 million, to invest in primary care in the premise across Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes, and as Rima says, we managed to fund 23 of 53 requests we had from practices to increase their capacity. Some of that money has been invested in Leighton Buzzard to increase the rooms that we have at Leighton Buzzard Health Centre, so that John and his colleagues can use recruit some of the additional roles, such as paramedics, clinical pharmacists, and others to take the pressure off general practice, and hopefully that over time will make it easier to get a general practice appointment. We're also in the process of re-specifying our services for people who have muscle and back pains, our musculoskeletal services, because at the moment, if you have that sort of pain, you go to a GP who then refers you, but we know that 30% of the GP appointments are for those sort of things, and we want people to have direct access to those services. So we are doing a range of things in order to make GP access easier, but we don't have lots of funds to invest in capital, and every time we invest in capital, if we haven't got all the capital from the developer, we then have to pay the rent, and as well as the maintenance and other things, and that causes a pressure on our revenue budget. So it's not without hope, and I'm really hopeful that we can, with Van Dyke, do some interesting things with Central Bedfordshire Council to release some more capital, because the more capital that goes into a building, the lower rental costs are, and the further we can stretch our revenue. I think the other thing, just to reiterate, as John says, there is a national shortage of general practitioners, and we do need to think about how we can encourage and love our doctors to come into general practice. Because having been a community and primary care practitioner myself, I know it's the most exciting part of the NHS. It's the most rewarding part of the NHS from my point of view, and I'd like other clinicians to feel like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. Well, now it's your turn, public. So if there are any Q&As that people would like to get their hands up for, I'll go in the order that I saw the hand. Gentleman right in the middle in a light-coloured jacket. There is a microphone if you would prefer the microphone. Please.
I'm just an ordinary resident of Leighton-Linslade and been here for many years. I'm backing up a little what Mr. Andrew said there. 40 years ago, we realised then that we were the biggest town in Bedfordshire without a hospital. We asked, we begged for a hospital, no deal, we didn't get it. It was decided, and Andrew touched on this, a fund was started at that time, going back 35, 40 years, by residents, saved up a fair amount of money, I don't know exactly how much, maybe 50, 60,000, and a local landowner, Arnold Sands, offered to give us the land to build. It was that close. And our money was saved and given to a management trust for use for a hospital. We never heard any more about it until 10, 15 years later when we heard, well, sorry, no hospital. It was converted to something between maybe a health hub, and now it's doctor's surgeries. Can't you understand that the people of Leighton-Linslade need, yes, for the new areas, a doctor's surgery, of course, which surely can be provided by the doctors themselves, setting something up themselves, but we need a hospital, a cottage hospital, a small hospital, half a dozen beds, x-ray services, that type of thing. Because 35 years later now, no sign of the money that we had, no sign of the land, except for the good donations from various landowners, and no sign of the hospital. And I repeat, hospital, not a glorified doctor's surgery.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, sir. You've recounted the history. I won't embarrass the lady by naming her, but I've spotted her in the audience, the one who did shake the tin. I've been looking after an 83-year-old who's been at a community hospital down in Hampshire for the last 7 weeks. I visited her every weekend, so I do get the value of community hospitals. There will be arguments about exactly what the town needs. I think there is no question we just need additional healthcare facilities. I'm actually going to slightly sidestep that one because we have the head of primary care, Nicky, I don't know if you want to come in that, or Felicity, or Rima, or even John on exactly what our priorities should be if we do have some money. I'm not a clinician, my job is to fight for health, but I'm going to defer to those people who are trained and have specialist knowledge. So on the far left is Nicky Poulain, who's the head of primary care for the Integrated Care Board.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that welcome. John explained that he was a primary care network clinical director, and I think the really, really important thing, and is there anybody here today who's part of the patient participation group of a practice working? Okay, perfect. So it is working with you in those forums about prioritising. Now, there is something, and I don't know if anyone's heard in the audience of virtual wards. So it is something that we're working with system partners. And in fact, in the audience, we've got my colleague, medical director, who's very involved. At the moment, just in answer to your question about community beds, there's some really innovative work, and we can give you some more information about what we call virtual wards. And at the moment, our priority is being the step down from when people are well enough to be transferred home, but their care is still in need of consultants. So the consultant is still clinically responsible,
and the integrated team, so that's nurses working from the community, and we are increasingly seeing the nurses and staff from the hospitals supporting that person in home. And there's some national work that demonstrates this is much, much better, not only for the families and for the patient, and it makes that transition if someone's been unwell. So we're doing quite a lot of work on step down, and the next area, and in fact I had a meeting earlier this week, is about how we're working with our primary care network clinical directors about what we call the virtual step up. So it may be, for example, if John had visited a patient at home and they're in need of a specialist, it would then be to a team, and it may be that that person was put onto, for an hour, the virtual ward, but the patient still stays at home. And it's how, and I think Felicity mentioned about how we need to be innovative and work in that way. So not the defines, I have been a nurse and I remain a nurse, so that if I worked in a hospital, I'm not confined to working in the walls of the Luton Dunstable, so you could work at a patient's home.
What we were asking for all those years, the simple cottage hospital, where you could go to for a broken arm, your child cuts his leg, a few stitches, an X-ray, smaller things. It wouldn't be so complicated as what you make it surely.
I'm going to pass to John if you want to add any what we've said. Thank you, John. I'll get John to do a very brief answer to that, and then we'll move to the next question.
Well, I've been in Leighton Buzzards for a long time, perhaps not quite long enough to follow the long saga of community hospital. I mean, I'm also not party to the funding that would be involved. I can only provide services. So if Andrew thinks there is a magic money tree somewhere and there's genuinely an opportunity to build some form of premises, whether you call it a cottage hospital, whether you call it a hub, whether you call it an extra surgery, I'm all for it. Let's sit down and work out how we can do it. What's in my gift is to provide the services. I have nothing in my pocket. Even as a PCN director, the funding I have is to provide staff. As I said a bit earlier, I can't build buildings, but if there is movement as far as building some form of facility locally is concerned, I'm delighted to be a part of it and would happily work with the players concerned.
Thank you. I have a gentleman to my right in a grey striped jumper. Are you happy to speak, or would you like the mic? Please.
The old post office, sorting rooms, right down in the middle of town. It's a very ideal place. You've got the town buses that go to and from the high street, so everybody could get there. The town car parks were within walking distance. You know, what's the problem with told to go there?
Thank you. I saw some heads shaking that we don't necessarily want a community hospital, so I'll come back to that, but I'll come back to Richard Wenham on that one, just from a planning perspective. Yes, there are some other hands. The lady in the blue jacket, first of all.
That's me. I'm not sure whether you can hear me. The first thing I want to say is that it seems to me that all of you on the panel are doing the very best you can in appalling circumstances. And it's obvious that Andrew has been working as hard as he can to get things changed. But the elephant in the room here, very, very polite, is that we've had at least 10 years of underinvestment in our National Health Service. If any of you saw Question Time a couple of weeks ago, there was a special one on the NHS, and it was very clear that the research has been done, and we're now in Leighton Buzzards seeing one tiny impact of that gross underfunding in our National Health Service. And everyone on the platform there is up against it. And we're going to blame them when we can't get a GP appointment. But the fault lies with the government. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'll take that one head on. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Just to say that we have to look at the kind of society society doesn't pay attention. I'm sorry to say it again. We have a government that does not care.
Okay, I just, if you'll forgive me, the people from all parties here tonight, I've not been party political, and I'd like to try and focus on the actual issues, but let me just respond to the points you made. So, just some boring facts. This country has lived beyond its means every year since 2001. The health budget is the highest it has ever been. And actually, if I look at the police, if I look at schools, if I look at local authorities, they look with some envy, I have to say, at the increase in the NHS budget. Now, the NHS saved my life when I was 24. I had an emergency operation. I will always, always fight for it. It was there for me in my hour of need. I want it to be there for every one of you. 2 of my children work for it, so it's pretty personal in my family. And I promise you, I will always fight for it. Of course, you know, I would love a much higher sustainable tax base, but I think that's a discussion perhaps for a slightly later time. It's a totally fair point, and I've responded to it. We would all dearly love to have more money, but we have put more in, and we are borrowing money that we don't have, to be honest, in order to do that.
Thank you. I have a gentleman on the edge there in a dark green coat, just further back. I'll take a little look next time. I'll go to the front row.
I'm happy to put policy but I was going to say.
Sorry, it was the other gentleman.
I think it's
That gentleman with the mic. Please go ahead.
So I wanted to have a slightly different discussion. So there's been a lot of opinion expressed here, most of which I agree with. But what I would like to question the panel is what basis have these decisions been made on, and what is the current status of Leighton Buzzard in terms of numbers of GPs per head of population, compared to the other centres of population in the authority?
Thank you. So in answer to your question, we do track GP numbers, which is, I think, you're really looking at is is your real question about actually how many GPs we've got in this area and also in the BLMK. Is that?
Yeah. So are we? How do we fare against the rest of the area? It feels like we have very few GPs.
Right, I've actually got figures and I'll give them to you. So, but it's probably useful just in describing if anyone looks at numbers, because they are available on the website. You can all look it up and you can analyse it. When GP numbers are published, you have to look at whether we're talking about full-time partners, because that's, if you look at numbers that are lower, it's full-time partners. And other measures are with GPs and what we call GP registrars. They're qualified doctors who are training to be GPs. Felicity and I regularly use the expression that a fully qualified GP is a consultant of generalism. And so it's just important that if any of you see GPs in training, they are fully qualified doctors, but they're training to be GPs. So as far as the numbers, we track it every month. Now, we are reliant on the practices, and they all do, and John being one of them, they do submit their GP numbers. So and I will just give it to you so I'll give it to you accurately, we work out that the GP numbers, so these are the ones including GP registrars, for this area, for Leighton-Linslade, it's 4.2 GPs per 10,000 population. So our average in central Bedfordshire is 4.8. So you've got 4.8 compared to yourselves here in this PCN is 4.2, so it's lower. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of context, and this is a national context here, and this is something I listened to, it was some latest information through NHS England. So nationally, so these numbers are slightly different. Nationally, there's an average of 2,250 patients per GP. So that's an England national average. The there's huge variation. So this is at a level of ICBs, and I think Felicity's mentioned is 42. The big variation, if we look at Kent and Medway, they have as many as 2,700 patients per GP, whereas in Gloucestershire, it's the lowest level, it's 1,900 patients. Now, those numbers, when you look in our area, so in Bedfordshire, Luton, Milton Keynes, John is one of 23 primary care networks, and that's why it's important that we do some really deep, granular work at assessing those numbers.
Yeah, but you do seem to have said that we are under provisioned compared to surrounding areas.
You're absolutely, and
in that case, why is it that we haven't been prioritised compared to those areas?
so you have been prioritised, and this is where you absolutely, and I'm going to do a bit of a double act with John. So GP, we've got 3 GP practices in this primary care network, and it's the GP practices that recruit their staff, including GP partners. Now, we in the Integrated Care Board, and particularly myself and my team, work very closely with all of the practices, particularly with GPs, but with all the other staff. So we have something called the Primary Care Training Hub, and I do think it's important. So our Integrated Care Board, BLMK, has been recognised as being exemplar for our Primary Care Training Hub. Now, I think it was mentioned earlier about GPs retiring. So we do a lot of work at retaining staff, equally at the other end of recruiting staff, and also at helping staff well-being. I really can't say enough, there is a total and utter attention to supporting practice workforce, but where you said you don't feel you've been prioritised, it absolutely is. But I think the proof of the pudding is about John, because he works as the Primary Care Network Clinical Director, he works with the other 2 practices, and certainly in his neighbouring practice we have done some bespoke, absolutely bespoke work at helping them to recruit GP.
Could I just challenge you a little bit on that? You're talking about something which is slightly different from what was given in the introduction, which was that we were hearing about some things that we weren't getting. And you're talking about something which wasn't discussed and which is within John's remit, but the things like the health hub or an additional GP, they're not in his remit. Why are we not being prioritised for those?
So I just wanted to add, before I hand back to Farzana, that your council, our council, is really concerned about the provision of the number of staff, not just GPs, but clinical pharmacists, physiotherapists, nurses, and so on in primary care. We have Councillor Mark Salian with us tonight, who's the chair of our Social Care and Health and Housing Scrutiny Committee, who's invited the ICB, who turned up on several occasions to actually be quizzed by your councillors about the overall provision across central Bedfordshire and what's being done about it from a health point of view. So Mark's one of your nearby councillors for Heath and Reach, and taking a leading role in pushing and lobbying for getting that extra provision done with the ICB.
Thank you. I'm going to get John to just respond very quickly to that, gentleman.
Thank you. I mean, at risk of repeating some of the things I said earlier, part of the issue is recruitment. So all the GP practices are looking for extra staff, particularly as our numbers are increasing. It is very difficult at the moment, so that is one issue. What I think is a way forward is to be a bit more innovative in how we provide some of the services that we provide. So patients very understandably want to see at least a clinician in a timely way. If you have something unpleasant but relatively straightforward, like say a tonsillitis or a sore throat, you'd probably rather see a minor illness nurse on the same day or in a timely way than to see me in a week or two's time, by which time it's a bit late for, it's not a very timely thing. So we are able to expand some of these services in order to try and make up for the shortfall. So I think a lot of it is about how we use our services better, but bear in mind that each practice is aware that there is an issue as far as recruitment is concerned, and if you know any good GPs out there, let me know.
Thank you,
John. I'm going to...
I'm just going to say that it particularly bothers me, as somebody that's been in practice for years, to see that general practice as a profession is a national issue, having access issues. I don't like it. I want to change it, and I'm determined to try and do that.
Thank you. Moving to the next question. Gentleman on the front row. Did you want the mic?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
I've lived in Leighton Buzzard since 1951, on and off, right? I can remember going back 30 years when we had 6 surgeries, right? We haven't had a hospital in Bedfordshire since the last century. Bedford Hospital was built in the last century, right? Where is all the money that we've paid for years and years and years in this town? Yeah? Toddington got a hub. Dunstable got a hub. They've got a hospital 2 miles away from Dunstable. Why does all the money seem to go to Dunstable? You build thousands of houses. Who's giving people these permission of building all these houses without hubs? It's got to be your lot. So what have you got to say to that?
Thank you. Thank you for that. If I can direct that to...
So, I come back to the fact that we have planning, we have housing. The government tells us how many houses we have to build in our area. No, we don't suddenly say, oh, it'd be a great idea to build loads and loads of houses. And with those houses, we have to provide facilities, and we get developer contributions to do things like roads and almost swallowing it, and I'll need some medical attention, I think. So with those facilities, we have to provide for those houses. We have to provide facilities, and the responsibility for providing health facilities is with NHS England and now the ICB, but it used to be the CCG, before that the PCT, and heaven knows what it was called before that. So no, I'm sorry, the council cannot whistle up those extra facilities. We have all our plans available, they're open in public. All the different authorities can look at them. Andrew referred earlier to education. Well, the council plans and provides school places. And by the sound of it, in general, it works. Not every time, but in general, it works. So, health has been treated differently in the past by the governments of all colours, and clearly, it's not working. So, the council, as I said earlier, stands ready to support provision of facilities where we can, whether that's trying to find land available, or helping with funding where we can, and of course pushing and working with our stakeholders and also with MPs and others. And not just in Leighton, I have the same problem across the whole of Central Bedfordshire, and in fact, it's the same problem across the whole of the country, I'm afraid. It's an intractable issue at the moment.
So, Alfred, I think you're completely right, and I'm conscious we have at least one gentleman from Houghton Regis here, and I did open this meeting to absolutely everyone. The problems in Houghton Regis will be even more severe, actually. It's going to be larger than both Leighton Buzzard and Dunstable. Alfred, you are right. The current way that capital is allocated for health, when we have massive new housing estates, so roughly 6,000 new houses in Leighton Buzzard, 8,000 to Houghton Regis. The NHS uses 2.4 people per house to calculate the number of patients. That is 33,600 extra residents in this area, and there is nothing concrete I can point to at the moment, and that is simply not acceptable. Now, I don't mind what government it is. It's poor planning, it's poor administration, it's lack of prioritisation for primary care capital, and it's not good enough, and I don't care if it's my party or anyone else's, I will call it out.
If I can just add a little bit more. I completely agree about the disconnect between housing and health provision, totally. That is why the integrated care systems boards that we are running were created. It's a baby organisation. We're getting there. We're trying to get there as quickly as possible. It is difficult. So Richard Wenham's council is part of the ICB. We are talking to them to try and overlay where the growth is and match the need. But you should also realise that the rules that apply to the councils, there are also rules that apply to the health service. For the whole of our patch, Bedfordshire, Luton, Milton Keynes, we're given £1.6 million to spend on capital. That has to include GPIT, better telephony, so they can actually get through on the phone, and helping support their estates. It doesn't take a genius to work out, we don't have in that pot the capital, and even if we did have the capital, we have to ask for permission to build things. It's a long process, which is why we're trying to find other ways of getting there. But I just wanted to really highlight that we hope that things are going to be much more synchronised going forward between housing growth and other forms of growth and what we can provide in health services. But buildings are not the same as the workforce, as John keeps referring back to. We are training a lot of GPs. We've recently trained up 8 more that are going to be around central Bedfordshire, not necessarily all in this patch. But it is a start, which for a baby organisation is a good start. I hope you might see that. Thank you, panel. Gentleman in the red jumper.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for, is it Councillor Wenham? So plainly we've heard about the problems with supplying medical staff, etc., which plainly isn't within Central Bed's remit, but you do hold, and I'd like to know how much, a substantial amount of Section 106 monies from the new development. Andrew has already answered one of the questions I did have about the piece of land, and it seems that we can raise some capital from that. But Central Beds have an ideal site for this health hub, which is when Westfield, Old People's Home, is vacated. You don't need to build a new facility, you just need to refurbish an existing one, which is also a lot more environmentally friendly to reuse an existing building. And I fail to see why that building can't be refurbished. And the capital from Section 106 and the money from this piece of land near Van Dyke School, you know, the capital problem should be solved. Can you answer how much money we've got in Section 106 and what the value, or whether or not that land in Duncan Drive can be used as a health hub? Thank you.
So, in terms of 106 contributions for health, in this area, the council currently holds about £88,000, plus potentially the land on the development east of Leighton, which is, if we can repurpose that, it's not needed, that potentially provides some more money into the health pot. So, in terms of use of other council land, yeah, we managed to find some land in Dunstable, which helped that process, and if we're able to do that and the ICB can find the funding to do that, which I think will be a real challenge because we've just heard about the revenue issues that they have, and also the new way that unfortunately capital and leases are going to be treated by the NHS. No, the council is trying to find a way forward, and I don't know whether that's the right location for the ICB would consider, but no, we're well aware of issues on land south of the High Street. The council has commissioned a report which is just coming forward internally and will shortly come out for some public consultation. And I know that the town council has done some really good work with a working party again on land south of the High Street. And so I'm hoping that there's going to be a meeting of minds and then public consultation about how we can get the right facilities on that land for the community, and also importantly how we can fund that from the council taxpayers' purse, because it's all right saying we can spend this, we can spend that. It fundamentally all comes out of our pockets, and we have to make sure that there's a sensible business case. So, yes, there's not a lot of Section 106 money in the pot. What there is, the ICB knows about it, and I'm sure they've got plans to use it. In terms of capital funding, the council will be as creative as it can be in using our capital budget if the NHS can use it. But the question is, for Felicity, I don't know whether you can now. But no, we have to try and find a way forward for that.
Can we come back briefly? So the council fully own that site, and I dare say it's worth a lot of money. I'm amazed that from 3,000 new houses, in excess of 3,000 new houses in this district, you have managed to raise £88,000 towards health. This is a shocking.
I'm afraid, sorry sir, it's not shocking.
Put aside the issue of the paltry sum that you've raised on Section 106. Putting aside the paltry sum that we've managed to raise for Section 106 monies from developers, the site in Duncan Drive car park is fully owned by the ratepayers, the council taxpayers, by us. Now, I'd like to know how many people in this audience think that would be a good location for a health hub. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah. So can you confirm now that you will actively consider that as part of the solution to this issue and not give me general answers? Why?
I'm not just trying to give you general answers. Yeah. Let me respond to that. Firstly, the developer contributions have to cover everything associated with the development. When the council receives a planning application, it can only ask for Section 106 requirements when we're asked by relevant authorities, whether that's a health authority, a fire authority, the police authority. Internally, the council asks for many millions of pounds to fund education, road improvements and other things, community halls, sports pitches, changing rooms, contributions to leisure, money for the town council to support play facilities and such like. So you may think that the amount of health money is low, and it is. I think it should be more. But we can only request from the developer what, in this case, the health authority at the time, which I think was the PCT, 2 health authorities ago, asked for. And the council secured many millions of pounds of money from developers for all the other facilities. So I put your mind at rest that the developer didn't get away with not paying a full amount of money. So the other aspect about 106 is that a development only generates a certain amount of money. Andrew talked earlier about health needs to get more money out of 106. Well, I'm afraid it's in the government's hands, because if we want more money out of the uplift in land values, and I think personally it's absolutely atrocious that a piece of land can be valued at £10,000 when it's a farmer's field, and you get planning permission, and in this area it's worth £1.5 million or more pounds, and the local authority can only capture a very small portion of that, maybe 10–20% of that value for community facilities, including health. And if we try and do more than that, the developer comes back and says, oh, well, we're not going to make enough profit, so that means no social housing or whatever, or less money for education and so on. So to get around that, the government needs to change the rules so we can get more of that uplift to provide more community facilities. And I am pleased to say that Michael Gove is bringing forward proposals, and I really hope that they see the light of day in the housing bill, so we get more of that money in future to fund more of these facilities. But that doesn't solve the historical problem. Now, the land you're talking about, if there's a way to use that land in the same way that we've used land in Dunstable, and the way that we've used land for a doctor's surgery many years ago in Biggleswade, then yes, we'll enter discussions with the ICB about it. But it doesn't change the fundamental issue I have to go back to Felicity on, is how do they pay the running costs and get the staff? Now, finding a plot of land and actually even finding capital via the council is the lesser of all the other issues we've talked about tonight. So this council is not a barrier to getting this done. It's trying to get all the ducks lined up and put in place to make this happen. And believe me, it's tough.
Thank you, Richard. Now, a number of hands have gone up. I have about 7 or 8 in my mind. I'm going to call them in order. If I can ask you to keep it succinct, direct to what we have in point. I want to keep the discussion going, but equally not repeat ourselves. I want to get other questions in as well. I'm going to start with the lady here at the front. Are we comfortable that I use first names where I know them? Because obviously we are live streaming. Are you all happy? I've got the lady at the front. Then I've got Chris. Then I've got the gentleman in the blue jumper. Then I have Victoria. Then I have Patrick. Then I have Mark in the front row. So let's start with this lady in the front, please.
Hello, my name is Linda Grant, and I'm Director of Health Watch Central Bedfordshire.
You're much further down. These hands are up much before you, please.
Hello, my name is Linda Grant, and I'm your Director for Health Watch Central Bedfordshire. I've lived in Leighton Buzzard, and I was at all the meetings when Central Beds Council showed us all the lovely slides. I've actually got them at home if you'd like to see them. I should have brought them tonight, to tell us what the hubs would look like. We were promised if all these new houses were built, we would 100% get adequate medical facilities in whatever shape or form. And I've got lovely pictures. I moved out of the town and I live in Toddington. And by the way, we don't have a hub in Toddington. It's not a hub, it's a doctor's surgery. And we, just down the road from us, all the houses, the Houghton Regis area, Linmere, round there were built. We were promised again by Central Bedfordshire, and I've got the pictures and the slides again, that there would definitely be adequate medical facilities, especially as Houghton Regis surgery at the time was full to capacity as it was with patients. What is Central Beds doing then? Because you promised us in Leighton Buzzard, you promised us in Houghton Regis, and neither of those places are going to get, and it was Central Beds, not the CCG, Central Beds. Patricia Coker, she went round the country, she also went to Biggleswade and to Flitwick also and promised them the same things.
So this is part of the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is where the council meets with previously the CCG and now the ICB to look and review its work in public health. And as part of that, some years ago, that's where the council, working with the CCG at the time, pushed the view that the way forward was to have our 5 hubs across the area. This is a vision. They weren't promised at the time. The council committed to find money for the first 2 somewhere in the area, and a view, and we've tried to find more money through various different routes with applications for different government funding over the last few years. And currently, we've been unsuccessful in getting additional funding, but that still wouldn't solve the problem of how the ICB is going to find the staff and the revenue costs to run them. So this is, it takes time to put these things in place. It's still our vision to push the ICB to provide these hubs, but there is an intractable money issue at the moment that has to be solved, and a staff issue. It's finding the capital to do these is the least of the issues.
Why wasn't it intractable then, when you promised? Patricia Coker stood in front of us and promised, if we build this, we will build a hub for you, because we realise all these people are coming to the towns and we haven't got enough facilities. We will, and I argued at the time, I said, it's all right, Patricia, saying you're going to build them. Are you going to put it in writing for us? And she said, I'll give you the slides, Linda. I've got them.
Well, I'm pretty sure I've probably seen them as well. It's about a vision for healthcare. We've made a start on doing that with the ICB, but it's going to be a long, long road, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're actually all in violent agreement that the current system doesn't work well, does it? I mean, I am completely and entirely dissatisfied with the planning for additional health facilities when you build large-scale new housing. It is not working, it is flawed. So, someone said recently, question how much I challenge this. So I checked, I've raised it 25 times in the House of Commons. I'll raise it again next week. I've got a question in the order paper. I will go on raising it for as long as I, have the authority to do so, because it is not right. Sometimes you just call a spade a spade. The current system is broken, it doesn't work. We managed to get capital allocation broadly right for schools. Why can we not get it right for health? Exam question, answer please. Not difficult.
Thank you. Chris, if you want to go next, and if we can, let's look to the present and the future and how we work forward.
Can I, despite what Andrew just said, about education works? Education works, Andrew, because most of the schools in this country are run by academy trusts and not directly by Central Bedfordshire. Now, the easy remark from that would be to let Spire build a private health clinic in Leighton Buzzard, but I don't want to go there. Where I would like to go is to say that there are 2 sites close to the High Street which could be used as drop-in centres, as triage centres, where practiced nurses and a qualified paramedic, not a doctor, there are plenty of paramedics that I know who would appreciate being given 2 days a week to sit in a drop-in centre. But the other thing, you've got Duncan Drive, you've also got a massive building on the High Street which is going to be vacant on the 1st of September. And can we please find a way of taking that back from HSBC before it becomes a tapas bar and we all have to pour our drinks onto the floor because it's an extension to Witherspoon. And the other thing I want to say about money, 6,000 new houses, and this is very much on the back of an envelope. 6,000 new houses in Leighton Buzzard, to me, equates to between 15 and 18 million additional council tax revenue, and a lot of that could go on the health of this town. Thank you.
So let's just actually talk about a few facts rather than myths. So place planning for school places is the responsibility of the council and capital. And
years.
Would you like me to answer your question, sir, or not?
No.
I don't want to hear you anymore.
No, I don't. Because all we've heard from you tonight, quite frankly, is bullshit.
I'm sorry, I have to come back. On education, the council is responsible for school place planning and for capital investment in school places. That money comes through the council. A lot of it's raised either from Section 106 or it's your own local council taxpayers' capital or it's grants from the DFE. And that is allocated to schools. That is the position the council has, and it works with whether it's an academy or a maintained school. As to the building you're talking about, I'm not familiar with it, but I will find out about it. I don't know if it's a council building or not. In terms of the money we get from council tax, that comes from new houses, that is revenue money. It's used every year to provide the services that you all use, whether that's vulnerable children, education, adult social care, fixing the roads, etc. So,
Fixing the roads.
and also for the record, every house that is built, the council tax that comes from it is not sufficient for the services that the council provides. So we have to get funding from other sources, from business rate, from grants, from fees and charges to balance the budget. So,
thank you. I would like to keep this discussion relevant to health, please, and GP provision and what we are here for. I understand passions are running high, but we're not here to discuss CBC. Thank you. Thank you. If I can move on to the next gentleman in the blue jumper. Level with where you are. Glasses in his chest. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Glasses in the chair. It's further down.
Down here.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Madam. Thank you. Thank you.
I've got a very simple question for you.
Oh, come on.
How come Milton Keynes is involved in this? We've got representation from people from Bedfordshire, but it seems to me odd that we've been lumped in with Milton Keynes. And are we the poor relation?
Thank you.
Yes, so the country was carved up
Literally.
at national level, and Milton Keynes also wants to know why they're in the same patch as us. That's why we have 2 ambulance trusts. But actually, in all seriousness, each of our 4 footprints does some things amazingly well and some things really poorly, and we can learn really well from each other. So Milton Keynes, as a now a city, is really far advanced in this country in terms of technology, and I mean that as a city, not just the health part. The hospital's got robots running around. I mean, they are, in that way, there's a lot to learn from them. So it doesn't impact the funding that comes here because we get the funding for the whole. So it's not that you are losing out because Milton Keynes is with us, but actually see it as an advantage that we can learn from them and they can learn from us.
Thank you. And I think the next on my list was Victoria, if I remember rightly. Microphone's just coming up.
Thank you. I think a very first point to remember is we have excellent patient participation groups who have been working incredibly hard to pull together what people really need and liaising with the doctors. And they have been patiently and quite steadily saying that we need a minor injuries clinic, which hasn't been mentioned at all this evening, which really worries me, and we need these facilities on land south of the High Street. Now, I think what's crucial is we work together. I think it is marvellous that Councillor Wenham has talked about looking at land south of the High Street, because this is the first time in any plans that has come forward talking about it for health. So we have made a massive step forward in this meeting. But it is about, as Dr. Henderson said, innovation and how we work together. Because we've got adult social care, we've got community groups, we've got a huge range of people who can work together and pool their resources. And there's been one crucial bit missing from this evening, which is the cost of people going to hospital because they can't get primary care. That is a huge amount of money, and I'm not seeing the overview of if we save money from people going to hospital, then you actually start getting the revenue, as Councillor Wenham has said, because I do agree with him, we have to have business cases, we have to find the revenue, and that is the crucial bit. So if we really look at the evidence for hospitals, so please, if you could answer from the ICB about how we could look at taking that money and using it better, so instead of it all going into hospitals, we use it much better locally, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. In terms of reducing use of hospitals, I absolutely agree with you. If we can stop people going to hospitals, we can move money, but we have to do that. And Nicky is working with the Primary Care Network clinical directors to look at different ways in which we can do that. We do have to increase access to do that. We've been looking at technology and whether we can bring some technology and near-patient testing more locally, which plays towards a minor injuries unit, but isn't a minor injuries unit. But, so we are looking at all of those aspects. But the problem is that we can't stop paying for things before the change has happened. So we do need to find ways of doing that, and that's why Nicky's working with the clinical directors to identify schemes to do that.
Victoria, I know how passionate you are about particularly preventative care, and obviously listening to your ideas, we've great interest at the council. And you're well aware the council's put lots of money into additional things like active travel, cycling, walking, countryside access, and so on. So, where we can work with that and find a way forward in Leighton, I think that's a really good idea.
Thank you. Now, if I remember rightly, Patrick, you were next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm fully aware that this is a problem that's across the country when it comes to accessing GPs and simple health care. However, we have acknowledged already that Leighton Buzzard is receiving amongst the poorest cover from GPs within our area. We also have to think about, over the last 10 years, 40% increase in population. That's 40% more people paying into the pot without any significant increase in GP provision and healthcare. We talk about doctors leaving the job, recruitment and retention issues. Is it not a wonder why anyone would not want to work in a place where they are overworked? The first solution to this problem is to be investing in getting more doctors to cover an already overstretched area such as Leighton Buzzard. My fear at the moment, and it's a genuine fear, is there are people in this town who are trying to access GPs and they can't get appointments, and quite often they can't even get through to a surgery. And they end up giving up. And so that simple little niggling problem they have a concern about suddenly becomes a very big problem. And when that happens, it becomes extremely costly to our NHS service to resolve that problem. For want of support for the first port of call, which is the GP surgery, that should always be the priority. They can nip these problems in the bud before they become extremely expensive, but we seem to be ignoring our obligation on that. I'm not going to point fingers and blame people because that's not helpful. Right now we need solutions to this problem, and I will work with anyone at all who can come up with really positive ways to address this. It's good that we hear the news about some land that may be available in Van Dyke Road, which can be reinvested into the healthcare service. But I would still say that 40% increase in population, all that money that we could have been using, it's gone to other areas, other people have benefited. I know other areas need the money just as much as we do. However, we've been sold downriver on a lot of the money that we've been putting into the pot. Thank you.
Pat, I'll just respond to that before maybe asking I could still call them the health authorities, it's just a bit simpler and quicker, if you don't mind. But I think you make a powerful point. I'd just like to come back to the 11% figure that we heard earlier. So of the budget of £1.6 billion, we heard 11% is on primary care. Now, I take it as a given, we'd all like more money for the NHS. We might quibble about what taxes we pay for it. But just on the existing budget, looking at the proportion, personally, as a non-clinician, but looking at the NHS overall, I think 11% is quite a low proportion. I think there is an argument for putting that higher. If we did, maybe we could prevent, admissions to accident and emergency and lengthy hospital stays and so on. So I'm just interested in the mechanics of how we might get there, and I don't know if Rima or Felicity or even John might have thoughts on that, or Nicky.
I'll take both of the questions so that we cover both points. Yes, we know that people would like more access to primary care, and I totally agree with you. If you can nip things in the bud, they are generally cheaper in the long term and better for the person involved. We are doing a number of things to try to alleviate the pressure on primary care, not just working with John on recruitment. We've recruited international GPs successfully into Leighton Buzzard. We've got a couple of those. We're also putting in place a pharmacy consultation service to take some of the more minor work out of the surgeries. We've increased the number of paramedics. We've increased the clinical pharmacists in the practices. We've got health coaches and care coordinators to try and make things slicker. The fundamental issue that I have is I can only recruit the GP. John and his colleagues can only recruit the GPs that they can, and we do support them to do that. So absolutely, we're trying to do everything we can to maximise the use of all primary care services, you know, particularly pharmacy, but particularly putting in place all these what we call additional roles, but the paramedics, all the advanced nurse practitioners, all qualified people, enhancing that primary care team and that primary care offer. In terms of what Andrew was saying about the 11%, yes, I would like to spend more than 11% of our budget in primary care, but at the moment, if I pull 1% out of the hospital to go to primary care, they say, well, we need you to pull out the work that goes with it. And the problem is doing that at the same time. So we do have a fundamental issue there, and that's why we're working on schemes so that we can do that. In terms of, you know, and I would say the same if I said mental health or so on, and we do have some rules about what has to be spent where as well, just to complicate things. But I won't go into the detail of that. So we are looking at ways in which we can increase funding into primary care. That's why we found an additional couple of million this year to try and do that, and we want to be able to do more of that. We're working with a range of clinicians to say what are the schemes that will help us keep people well at home, help improve the primary care access, and help keep people out of hospital, because actually, you know, that's better for us as potential patients, as well as more cost effective.
The other thing, just to remind people, is that more GPs, I'm flattered you think so, but is not necessarily the only solution or the answer. We're quite an expensive resource, and not only that, but we're not always the best at providing the care in all instances. So, for example, in recent years, we've developed, certainly in our practice, a set of matrons, sort of highly qualified nurses to look after our frail elderly, particularly those who are housebound and have complex care needs. And they do things incomparably better than we could ever do as GPs. They go out, they visit them, they make sure that the appropriate services are in place, they liaise with the local authority if they need further assessments and a different care package. It's been a revelation. Another example is our minor illness nurses. I've mentioned them once before. Generally speaking, they deal with the less complicated illnesses, again, probably better than we do, because they follow protocols, they're keeping up to date all the time, and they've also been a revelation. More recently, we've introduced first contact physio, so if you have a painful shoulder, a limp, rather than come and see me, and I'm going to refer you on to physio, you can go directly to the physiotherapy services, and they can plug you into the appropriate investigations or the appropriate further treatments. Again, it's been a revelation. So a lot of it is about working a bit more innovatively, and that is primarily what we're trying to do, both within practices and actually as within the PCN in terms of taking on extra staff. So,
thank you, John. Okay. So, Mark, if you want to go next, and immediately after Mark, Steve, if you want to, you had your hand up earlier.
Thank you. The Scrutiny Committee at Central Bedfordshire Council has done quite a lot of work on this, and I've spoken to Andrew Selous as well over the years about it. The issue is that the public could do with some facts, and one of the facts is that the issue isn't capital. The CCG, now the ICB, has been before the Scrutiny Committee a number of times, and I'm very grateful to you. And in fact, you're coming again on Monday morning, Nicky and others, so I'm grateful to you. The problem isn't capital. The council, the CBC, could build the buildings. The money could be found, we've learned over the last 4 years, certainly, and my predecessors. The issue is the revenue budgets rather than the capital. The revenue budgets are only in the gift of the NHS to pay NHS staff. Now, Andrew and I have discussed a number of times the funding formula for this part of England. in other words, central Bedfordshire, has been poor for decades for the police. It's been poor for teachers in schools for decades, the funding formula HM Treasury uses, and it's been terrible. It's been under, in terms of per capita, it's been terrible for healthcare. And I would suggest, partly because of the complexity and therefore the cost that hospitals incur in treating complex illnesses, the proportion of money for primary care has dwindled. So, and that's a national issue, yes, but this part of England has historically suffered under Labour and under Conservative, and the can continues to be kicked down the road. So I would like a slightly more respectful and data-based, factually based conversation on Monday morning. I'm sure we will get that again at the Scrutiny Committee on what we can do collectively. Andrew's been working very hard on this, but so has Central Bedfordshire Council, in getting the government and the civil servants who crunch the numbers at the Treasury to improve the formula for Felicity, the Chief Exec, and her directors. Because yes, if we just have if the size of the cake doesn't change, then we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're taking 1% off of hospitals to give to GPs. What we should be doing is saying this part of England, partly because of its location between Midlands, east of England, and proximity to London, has for decades been underfunded in police, in teachers, and in NHS staff. And I think that's where our effort needs to go. Not blaming the council for not building a building, because it can, and it has done in Dunstable. And there, guess what happened? In Dunstable, the NHS struggled. It took them a number of years, and it's still not over the line to have staff in the Dunstable Health Hub that it would like ideally. It still has challenges. So to bring that about in Leighton Buzzard, and I think we all agree it's underrepresented, we need to help the NHS, not CBC, the NHS, to get the better funding formula from central government.
So thank you for raising that. You're certainly right about the police and education. I was speaking on the police funding formula yesterday in Parliament. So quick question really for Nicky and Rima, if I may. Now, I remember about 10 to 15 years ago, possibly, your predecessor health authorities raising with me quite regularly the issue that our local health authorities were underfunded. And if I remember, the reason for that is that we had always lived within our means within health, and there were other authorities, I think Three Rivers, funny enough, is one that sticks in my mind, that lived beyond their means, and very unfairly, I thought their budget had been raised to fill their deficit, and that had left us behind. And I remember the example that sticks in my mind, that in St Albans you could get baby massage, but you couldn't get it in our part of the world. It's a silly example that I remember. I have to say, I haven't recently had you banging down my door saying that Bedfordshire was being unfairly treated. If that is the case, my commitment to you is I will take up the cudgels on that immediately. Your predecessor authorities did mention it with me some time ago. It's true in police, it's true in education, and I'm on both of those issues. If it's the case in health, please give me the figures, and I will go and fight hard for it.
So two things here. There has been historically in the past, so not recently, which is why you haven't heard about it, where there have been parts in the geography where they have been in trouble financially, and they couldn't get themselves out of trouble without a contribution from neighbouring geographies. That hasn't happened recently. Separately from that, there is a formula. And formula is not set by the NHS, it's set by an independent body, and it may go back to what you're talking about. It is currently weighted towards age, and it weights the population. So if you took the BNMK as a whole population, we're at about 1 million, maybe just a bit over, but when you then apply this formula that looks at age, doesn't look at deprivation, for example, and we know that big pockets of deprivation across the patch, it brings us to under 1 million. That has a knock-on effect on funding. So I've been raising it, but it's not within the gift of the NHS, so maybe it is within your gift to raise it, but you may have more information.
No, I mean, that's an excellent explanation, Rima, thank you. But the other thing I would say is I do think the balance of money going into primary care is incorrect. And I do think that, I understand why people focus on hospitals, they're big buildings, you can see it. Primary care is what works with us day in, day out. So I do think that the Card Hill formula, as it is for primary care, needs to be adjusted. And it's starting to affect other parts of primary care as well. Pharmacy is another one with a funding formula. Dentistry, we know, the dental contract. So all of the primary care contracts need a look at, and the funding formulas that go with them need to be corrected. So I would absolutely agree with that. Just on what Mark was saying about capital and revenue, absolutely correct, but the more capital we can get from elsewhere, the lower the rental we have to pay, so that reduces our revenue costs. So there is a balancing figure in there, just to be clear.
Thank you. And then we've got Steve, the gentleman in the middle, red scarf around his neck. If we can get the mic to him, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm going to try very hard to be succinct. The people in this room are paying millions of pounds per annum in taxes, and the people of the town, the 50,000 or so people we represent, are paying hundreds of millions of pounds in taxes. And people in the room have already commented that in return for that, we are not getting adequate health facilities. There are three separate major problems. The first and most urgent is the fact that there aren't enough practitioners to get on top of the wait for appointments. And the 7:45 a.m. scrum every morning for appointments is worthy of a third world country. Something has to happen about that. It's a situation that hasn't arrived overnight, although the virus has not helped. And there are people on the platform who are in a position to do something about this, and they should get on with it and do it. And I'm sorry that's a bit uncompromising, but I'll carry on like that. The second problem is that we have not got the new surgery in Eastern Leighton Buzzard that people were promised, and so the people there are forced to trek into the three existing surgeries and overload the patient lists of those three services, thus contributing to the problem in getting appointments. So the second problem is that the promise to meet those provision of those surgeries, both in Eastern Leighton Buzzard and in Leighton-Linslade, to replace the two that were quietly closed and not replaced. That needs to go back to the ICB board, and they need to reverse that decision. And the third decision they need to reverse is their decision to put on ice. They said tonight, no, it's not off the table, but it's certainly on ice. We heard the announcement at Christmas, or just after Christmas. They need to go back and reverse that decision and put the health hub back for Leighton-Linslade back into play. Now, Nicky Poulain mentioned in her short contribution something about working with PPGs, the patient participation groups. That is exactly what is not happening. There are good PPGs in this town, and they have been screaming and pleading for consultation on some of these strategic decisions, and they have not been given the time of day. In fact, it's worse than that, because the ICB is operating in its own bubble. It's not consulting, it has no consultation process, it's not meeting the 2022 legislation requirements to have a consultation process. This lunchtime, I had lunch with the legal advisor to the Norfolk and Waveney ICB, and they're operating quite differently in terms of public participation, not just in terms of going out to the public, but in terms of having members of the public sitting at board meetings and participating. And the ICB need overnight to change their approach to public consultation. Central Bedfordshire Council have been, for the last 12, 15 years, impotent in terms of keeping up with the growth in housing and planning the facilities of this town, not just in terms of health, but policing and roads and various other things. And the stewardship of the Section 106 process by Central Bedfordshire Council has been lamentable, and has also been accompanied by a rigid decision not to have a decent consultation process with local residents, and in the case of Leighton, the Town Council. Town Council's asked for that, and it's not been given the time of day. So people like me and like Edith Griffith, the chair of Bassett Road PPG, can traipse across to Chicksands, attend the meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board or the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, gabble for 3 minutes to try and get a complex presentation into that 3-minute straitjacket and not get an answer, and the whole system is simply designed not to give the people of this town a voice, and that the people are fed up. The people are fed up and they're not accepting these megaphone announcements from ICB and CBC. That time is over. Now it's time for the people on the platform and elsewhere to start listening to the people instead of telling us what we can and can't have.
Steve, I'm going to comment briefly before handing over to the ICB. I've got a lot of sympathy on your 3 points. Definitely more staff, at long last, and later than it should have been, and we should have done it sooner. But the Chancellor, I spoke to him last week about this, will be announcing an NHS workforce plan going out to consultation in the next couple of weeks. So absolutely, it takes a long time to train clinicians, but if you don't start, it's always too late. So totally agree with you on that. Totally agree with your surgery point. We've spoken about the consultation point with the ICB and public access. So perhaps I could just also ask the ICB, it seems to me that Bedfordshire Hospitals Trust seem to have more members of the public on their board. And I don't know how you are, I'd just be interested on, members of the public, patients being on your management and governance structures, and how formally and whether you are doing everything you can to listen to the people of the area.
Okay, so lots of things about this. So the NHS has not been good at talking to the public. Let's own up. We're not good. However, we are very serious about co-production. We're trying to learn from those who do it better than us. We do engage quite regularly. All our meetings are in public. So the board meets quarterly. We move around the patch. We are usually in the council offices. We move around the patch to make us accessible to the public. You are invited to submit questions. We always kick off the board meetings with the public's questions, and we respond as best we can, but that's not the same as consulting. I'd like to again reiterate, there was no decision, no discussion about the hubs. What you heard about back at the beginning of January was the backlog of that from existing premises where they put in bids to improve their premises. That's just a backlog, that's just the roof is leaking. We don't need to consult on that. We do need to talk to you as and when we start to develop those plans for whatever the hub might look like for this part. Will it be meeting your needs? We absolutely need to work with you. We don't even need to consult. We need to start right at the beginning, talking with you about what it is you want to see. Now, of course, I've jotted down everything you've said today. You're not all in agreement, and that's fair enough. But it gives us a good idea of the kind of things that you really want to see. And then we can shape it together, and when we've got something that we can go out with, we can then do the full consultation. So you're not at all being ignored, but we haven't been good at it. We know we haven't been good at it, and we are getting better. But it will take us a little while. And please do nag us if you feel that we're still not doing what we're supposed to be doing, but we are intending to do more than consult. It's called co-production.
Rima, you cancelled all the co-production. I sat on the co-production for your predecessors, and there was a whole group of us, and we did lots of work. We did choice. We talked about the 117. We got things like that done. That group was cancelled. We had £10,000 to last for this year, and it was taken away. We don't know where, and you said bye-bye. We will get back to you. No one's ever got back to that group. So where's the co-production, Rima?
So I can't speak for the predecessor organisations. They're no longer around. No, I really can't. I wasn't part of them. And Linda and I have talked about co-production many times. And it is project by project, programme by programme. What matters to you in this room will be different to when we talk to, say, Milton Keynes, going back to Milton Keynes. They will have different needs. We do need to involve you all. We're doing a massive piece of work at the moment, looking at health inequalities across the whole of BNMK, talking to all sorts of communities that we don't normally listen to really understand what they need. It's going to take a while. You all want very different things. If you all wanted the same thing, it'd be a quick conversation. But we are very serious about making this work.
But Rima, everyone wants hubs. It's been going on for years.
I'm sure, Linda, if I asked everybody in this room their definition of a hub, I would get every definition from minor injuries to drop-in centres.
We'll have a co-production group to talk about it and start it. At the minute, we're just going round and round in circles, really.
Thank you. At the front.
Just to come back to the point of why we were meeting this evening, what are you going to be able to do to solve our problems today? When I phone my GP tomorrow, and I am over number 30 in the list, and I'm on the phone from 1 second past 8, and then I comes 10 to 9, and the phone goes dead, and I don't feel like starting off again. So I go off to Luton Dunstable A&E department and sit there for 6 hours. What are you all going to do to resolve the problems now? It's very interesting hearing about the discussions about land and the building of a health hub in the future. But people in the town who are paying a significant sum of money, in general terms, we pay our taxes. What are we getting for it? What are you going to do now? Please bear in mind, it's not your money, it's our money. You are spending it on our behalf. And yet, the basic service really isn't there. What are you going to do about it?
So I'll make an attempt to answer that. And as a first, I just want to apologise. Sorry, I'll make an attempt because that's part of why Felicity employs me to try and find out what we're going to do. So as a start, we're very aware, and I apologise for that experience you've had with the telephone. So telephony is one of those key issues. Just bear me out. Leighton Road, we know, has got a good telephone system, and that shouldn't happen. Okay, so it doesn't. Okay, well, I tell you what I will commit is if you can organise the patient participation groups, because this is the level we can work through. But as a number one, it was to get the telephony sorted. But secondly, it is about working with John, and John and I have had a number of meetings. We've got his teams, my teams. It's literally about addressing what that issue. We've talked about, and Felicity mentioned different members of staff, and she mentioned the community pharmacy consultation service. There's a whole plethora. So I'll make that commitment, and we'll do that quickly so that you have that confidence. Because I think, as Victoria said, it's about working together. There isn't one single approach, it's multifaceted, but we are committed, and with the teams that will work directly with you, and I apologise, particularly to those people who make all that effort with patient participation group, but that's the sort of thing we can deal with, the primary care access issues together. And I'm just saying to anyone that if that does happen, there is the 111 service. It is a the only thing that I just say is you have to, and I do say the 111 because at the latest figures, and I do appreciate over time, the timing, to anyone that's familiar with it, the telephone is supposed to be answered within 60 seconds. Be respectful. But what I'm saying to you is that's what we're working with, and with the team, it's about we've put additional telephony staff, so the telephones aren't answered.
You asked me and I'm trying to be honest about what we're dealing with. We're trying to put in that extra capacity in the 111 as well as the GP practices for staff to answer your telephones. I'm honest, as Felicity said, we want to be open and honest and we will work with you. And part of that is actually, John mentioned about the direct access. There's a whole plethora, but we will work with you. And I think with there's a team of staff within John's primary care network, which is multifaceted. It's the community voluntary sector, the local authority, because different people need different things, and that's about getting it right for you. But I do appreciate answering telephones is a basic, and we've got to get that bit right. Thank you. Can we go to Julian on the front row, please?
So I'm coming here from a slightly different age demographic than most of you, and probably one of the only non-homeowners here. But we're attacking the new homes being built. Actually, for me, rather than the issues that are here today, I'm thinking a lot more in the future when I'll be in a position where I'll be needing the GPs a lot more than I am now. And one of the key aspects to fixing our ageing population is to make housing more affordable. So why are we not focusing more on the long-term future as well as fixing what we have now? And actually, what steps can we take to make sure we've got more GPs and having an older population that isn't relying on other old people for work? Thank you.
I mean, thanks, Julian. I mean, I think we're all in absolute agreement from John and what Steve said and what I said earlier, that we absolutely need more staff in the NHS. There are vacancies. We should have had a proper NHS workforce plan before now, but there is an absolute commitment from our former Health Secretary, now Chancellor, and I've spoken to him last week about it. It's going to be announced shortly. There'll be a full consultation on it. And as I said, we've got 4,000 newly qualified doctors trained to be GPs. From last year's cohort of graduates, that used to be only 2,600 back in 2014. So we have increased the numbers, that'll be 4,000 every year. But the trick is also to keep them in general practice and to make sure that their quality of working life is good. And I don't apologise for saying that at all. You know, I would say we're not North Korea. We can't force people to work in primary care. It has to be, dare I say, enjoyable and rewarding for them. And of course, we need more of them. And I'm absolutely resolute on that issue. So the workforce plans are there, Julian. Yes, we should have got going sooner, but they are in place now.
But you say 4,000 GPs, but it's attracting the GPs to Bedfordshire. I know, talking to ELF only yesterday, the biggest problem they have is attracting staff when just across the border there in Harpenden, the staff can earn more because they get more. So we've got to attract big GPs into Bedfordshire. So we've got to look at ways of doing that, and nurses, and paramedics, and ambulance drivers, because we've always seemed to be the poor county, and I don't know why, because it's a beautiful county.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid I'm not expert on what the terms and conditions are. I mean, if they're different, I mean, I would hope that we're not paying less than in Harpenden to come here, but.
So it's complicated how you're. No, but it's complicated. It's because what you're describing is it's the GP practices that the employers, but there isn't any evidence. But we can take this outside. There is not evidence of different staff being paid different rates in practices. So in primary care. So at the moment we're just talking about primary care. We're talking about primary care tend not to actually have staff on a gender change. So London waiting doesn't actually count. So we can work through, but honestly, that really isn't. We've had to work with some facts because I think some of that is slight myth, if I'm honest.
ELF said themselves yesterday that was one of the reasons why they couldn't get staff. Yeah. And they're a trust, just like we are the hospital.
I wonder if mental health pay, Linda, is perhaps slightly different from primary care. But your central point is absolutely right. We've got to attract people to this area, this town specifically. and we need to think about everything we can do, the whole package, as it were, to attract people here and keep them here. What I'd really love to have is young doctors who come here, buy here, spend their working lives here, as John has done, bless him, and that's 32 years, for goodness sake, and that is what we need. We need young doctors who will come and commit to do that.
Andrew.
So the only bit I will add is our commitment for training and learning, because all the evidence is if we get staff in and they learn and train locally, they stay locally, and that is evidence-based. So that is absolutely.
Just on that point, John's practice is the only training practice in the town at the moment. It's probably why he's got the highest number of GPs. So I'm pushing Leighton Road Surgery and Salisbury House very hard to become training practices. I think that is on the programme. Can't up the day too soon, and I think that will help. I'm just a little bit conscious of the time, so I think I'm going to hand back to the mayor to close the formal part of the meeting. I'm happy to stay around a little bit longer. I'm so sorry. We probably could have been here all night, but I just think out of respect to the people I've asked here, I'm probably going to ask Farzana to close the formal part, but maybe we can take questions. Please email me as well if there are any follow-up ones. I promise I will get back to you if you email me.
Can we just say,
Thank you.
What is the follow-up
Thank
from here? It's been great having all this, but what's happening next? That's what we all want to know.
Well, follow up. Number one, immediately, we've got to really dig deep into what this land on Van Dyke Road means, how much money it will provide. I have said to colleagues on the platform here, it's not my power to say it, but I've said I want an intensive period of action and activity, working at pace, I think Steve would call it, to actually release the value from that Van Dyke Road land and come up with something. I think the frustration has been heard. My commitment to you is to keep everyone's feet to the fire a bit on this. I can't do anything myself, I don't have a budget, but I can convene and I can make the arguments. And I will keep pushing the centre as well. The Department of Health absolutely gets the issue. I think we've had commitments on listening, on working with PPGs, if I heard correctly, on the telephony, on other issues. And thank you for being honest, actually, Rima, that you haven't done public consultation quite as well as you should have done. I mean, it's always big to admit to a fault, isn't it? So thank you for that. And I think we've all heard that commitment. My immediate task is to try and realise the land from the Van Dyke Road, the value from that Van Dyke Road piece of land. It's been there since 1980, for goodness sake, to get the maximum capital amount out of it, to lower the rent so we can do something for the town. And I will keep pushing everyone to achieve that.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We can't take any further questions now. We are slightly overrunning, as Andrew has already said. If I can just summarise, more than anything, it's clear that the passion we have for our town and our community is very, very apparent. If I may add that as my time as mayor, I have often, to anyone that will listen, it's not just about fancy carol concerts and going off to Christmas bazaars. Wherever I have been present with listening ears, I have shouted for Leighton-Linslade, the parish, to re-emphasise that a small percentage of the largest town in CBC is a large number of people, and we at Leighton-Linslade probably suffer from Rism. We're slightly healthier, so we get our health kicked down the line. We're slightly wealthier, so again, we're considered not as needy. We're considered safer just because we've got a pretty market cross and a lovely church. But we have hidden problems, and don't ignore us. So we are not to be ignored, and we take health in particular extremely seriously. Tonight has been very, very useful. We've probably learned nothing new, but we have learned where those weaknesses are and where action needs to be taken. And I urge my colleagues left and right that we take those actions and move forward for our town. And although I work with compassion, on the matter of Leighton-Linslade, I've become selfish. We've heard about national statistics, we've heard about the county. I want to know what's happening for Leighton-Linslade. And I urge you all to follow with interest, and I know you all will, as to how we are going to move forward on this issue. With that, I bring the meeting to a formal close.